Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm a guy called Joe and this is Bootstrapping Tools Let's Build, where we help scrappy bootstrappers just like yourself figure out how to overcome some of the hurdles that they're facing when building their businesses, or if they're just trying to make themselves better in their daily operations. Now, before we dive into today's topic, make sure to check out our YouTube channel. We got lots of videos up there that go through all sorts of low code and no code solutions out there, including Retool, apps, sheets, Google Sheets, Data Studio, as well as many others. If you don't see what you're looking for, feel free to shoot an email over to feedback@bootstrapping.tools, and we'll be happy to take a look at that application and possibly make a video just for you. Now, in today's topic, we're going to be going over how you can use Data Studio to create dashboards and report on the data that you're using in Airtable. And we're going to make that automated. So one of the reasons that you might want to do this is because Airtable requires a Pro plan for you to utilize some of their dashboarding and charting features. However, if you do have a lot of data that you're using Airtable for, you're doing a lot of work through there, you're going to want to report on that, and maybe you don't have the budget to use Airtable's Pro plan. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a Google Sheet. We're going to create a Google app script that's going to call the Airtable API, pull that data down, and then we're going to connect Data Studio on top of it. Well, we got a lot of work to do, so let's head over to our spreadsheet. All right, so what we have here is our Airtable base, one that we just started with some sample data about growth, experiments, planning, and execution. This is a pretty common one that you might want to report on. Over here on the right-hand side, I left it up just so we can see. In order to use some of these apps to showcase, your charts and diagrams and all of that, you require a Pro plan, which as we can understand, being a scrappy bootstrapper, you might not always have the budget for that. But not to worry, what we're going to do instead is we're going to take all this data down, and then we're going to shove it into a spreadsheet, and then we're going to hook that spreadsheet up to our Data Studio report. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to our Google spreadsheet. I just started one right now, fresh, clean slate, and then you're going to go over to your script editor. So that's going to be found under the Tools option on the top menu bar. Click on that and then just select Script Editor. If you haven't done that before, it'll basically just open up this page over here with a standard function called myFunction. I already renamed this one to Airtable Data Studio Demo, but this is essentially where we're going to get started. So the first thing, the first function that we're going to build is going to be our API request over to Airtable. So if we go back to our Airtable base, we only have one table here called experiments. And if you need to take a look at the API documentations, it's pretty easy. Just on the upper right, just click on the help icon over there, and then a right-hand tray is going to appear. And on the bottom of that is going to be a selection for API documentation. So let's go ahead and open that up. And within there, the cool thing about Airtable is that it will curate your API documentation specifically to your Airtable base. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see that besides the typical documentation you get for their API with the rate limits and the authentication and the errors, you also get the experiments table. This experiments table is essentially our table, the one that I was just showing you on the other tab. And this has all the fields that we're expecting, and the one that we're going to be hitting is list records. So the URL is just going to be this guy right here, all the way up into experiments. You don't need the rest of it, which is just max records, which is the limiter on data. And then if you wanted a specific view, you can do that as well. But we'll just take the primary view, which is defaulted, and then we'll just pull from experiments. So going back to our code, first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare the variable URL, because that's what we're going to use in our call, which we'll be using URL fetch app, which is also a library that Google Apps Scripts provides to you. Really useful library to have, especially when you're hitting APIs. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to define our API key. And this API key is going to be found in your documentation. So there's a little checkbox up on the upper right, which you can just click on and now show your API key. And this one is mine, but you're going to have your own. If you use mine, you won't be able to really access much besides whatever is the sample data here. So what you want to do is you want to go over to your own Airbase, your own Airtable base, copy the API key specific to your app in your table. We're going to paste this guy in here. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to start writing out our parameters, so our headers, our options, and all of that. First thing is first, headers. We're going to create an object out of that, and then within here we're going to do one of them is authorization, and in the Airtable documentation it said that it requires a bearer authentication. So that's up here, authorization, bearer, and then your API key. That's all you need to do. So go back over to our code. What we're going to say is bearer, and remember, because we have our API key already set as a variable, we're going to leave a space after the word bearer, and then we're going to combine it into this call over here. So we're going to do API underscore key, and that's going to utilize our variable that we declared above. And then underneath of this, sometimes you don't have to do this, but I think it's good habit. Just go ahead and type in content type with a hyphen in between those, application JSON, just so we can make sure that as we're making these requests, we expect the JSON format to be returning back instead of like XML or something else. Now we're going to create, declare an options variable, and then within there, we're going to say headers is equal to the headers that we just made up top. You don't have to keep it separate like this. It's really up to you. I personally like to do it just because it's a little neater to keep your code organized, and if you need to troubleshoot it, it's a lot easier to do it like this. Now the method that we're going to do is going to be get, because we're making a get request to get data from Airtable. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to do URL fetch app, and that's the library that Google Apps Script provides to us. And within there, there's a function called fetch, and fetch requires the URL, which we already declared a variable for, and then we can pass through parameters as options. Now, before we run this code, what we're going to do is we're going to set a variable called response to the results of URL fetch app.fetch, and then we're also going to get content text. Now the reason we need to do the get content text is because when we make the API call request over, we don't just get the data from the API, we also get response codes and all of that. So what you want is you want to get the content text from it, and that way that'll be the data that you're actually looking for in that response. Now, before we can actually read this, we also need to parse the data because it is in JSON. So let's go ahead and declare a variable called result. And then what we're going to do is all capital letters JSON.parse, and then we're going to parse out response from there. And to test it, we're just going to say console log, and we're going to log the results here. Let's make it a little neat. We'll add a colon space. So when we run this, what we expect to get back is the data that is in Airtable along with the fields for every single row that we get. So we go back to our Airtable view over here. We got the short name, descriptions, funnel impact, category, all that jazz. Let's go back to our code, and let's go ahead and just hit the run button. Actually, before you hit the run button, let's change our function name here. We're going to call this request Airtable Data. All right, now save it. And then let's hit the run button. So within the console log, we see here, we got the ID, which is the Airtable record ID. And then we have fields, which is set to an object, and then the created at time. We don't really care about the ID because we're not going to be sending updates to Airtable, so we don't necessarily need it. So what we'll do here is we're going to say console log result dot records. And then later on, what we'll do is we'll only pull down the fields information instead of just the ID and all that. While we're at it, let's also do a return result.records here. So run this code, and we should actually be able to see what's within the field objects now. So within here, we can see that we have engineering team hours, marketing team hours, success metrics, as well as the goal, category, end date status. We have all the data that we're looking for. The lead is still an object itself, but that's okay. We'll pull that down later on. So now that we have a working function to grab data from the API, let's create another function right above it, and we'll call this import Airtable Data. And for here, we're going to use this function that we just got. We're going to declare that variable as data. And then while we're at it, because we are going to be shoving this data into a spreadsheet, let's go ahead and declare our spreadsheet variable. So SS, short for spreadsheet. We're going to use the spreadsheet app, which is another library by Google Apps Scripts that lets you interact with the spreadsheet that you're attached to, or any spreadsheet. Actually, doesn't really have to be one that you're attached to, but you get to set the active spreadsheet in here, and then we're going to declare a variable called sheet, and that's going to be ss dot get sheet by name. And we didn't really do anything, and all sheets start off with the defaults tab as sheet 1 in there. So we'll just say get sheet by name sheet 1, and then later on we'll use that in order to actually get the range and then shove the data in there. So before we do that, now what we'll do is we're going to do a for loop through our data, and our data is going to consist of the records that we just got from Airtable. So let's just do a simple for loop. For I equals 0, I is less than data.length, and then I plus plus to iterate through it. And then within each one, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the fields data from each record. So let's do let fields equals data I dot fields. And actually, before we do this, let's go back up a level outside of this for loop, and we're going to declare a variable called, well, we don't want to call it data. Let's call it import data. We're going to set that to an empty array. So within here now, what we'll do is we're going to do import data, import data dot push. We're going to do an open square bracket within here. The reason we're doing the open square bracket is because when we shove the data from this data set into Google Sheets, Google Sheets expects it to become an array within an array, so a nested array, where each row is its own array, and then the entire thing is the columns. So you need to have nested arrays within it in order to actually shove into this grid system or format. So here, what we're going to do is let's just pick a couple of fields, nothing too crazy. We had short name in there, so we'll just go ahead and put in short name. And one thing just to highlight here, notice how short name has a space in between it. So typically you do fields dot and then the variable name, but because short name has a space in it and it needs to be exactly matching what is in Airtable, you need to do the square brackets and then put those in quotations. So we're just going to get the short name, and then we're going to go fields. We'll do description, and this one doesn't have a space, so we don't need to do the square brackets for it. Let's go back over to our documentation here. What else might be useful? Potential impacts could be useful. Category is useful. Funnel impact is useful. And then within the lead, there's a name, so we can also pull that. We don't need the email address right now. Let's just get the name from that instead. I guess goal is also pretty helpful as well. New goal, and let's say priority while we're at it. All right, so if I can remember all of that. Fields dot priority, fields dot status, fields dot potential impact. Yeah, potential impact. Okay, and then I think the other one was funnel impacts. Was that a capital I? Remember, case sensitivity is very important, and it is a capital I, so we're going to have to make sure that the potential impact also has a capital I as well, which it does, which is great. And then we also want the lead's name, so it's going to be lead.name. So notice here, I'm just going to pause real quick, fields.lead.name. We're kind of chaining it now, so we're going a level beyond what the other ones were doing. And that's just because it's just a variable underneath the lead. So you're able to go from the record into the fields, into the lead, and then into the name. And that's how we're going to get that information. I think that's it, right? Nope, goal. We also want goal. So let's grab that, and then let's call it a day from there. That's about all we need. So fields.goal. Now we have a bunch of fields over here. However, because we're going through each record, we're only grabbing the value. So we also want a header column. So right underneath import data, let's go ahead and kick it off with a push into the array. And in here, we're going to say name, which is the short name, but I don't want to write out short name. We're going to say description, and then priority, status, impacts, because I don't want to type out potential. Feeling kind of lazy. Funnel, which I guess we don't have to say impact either at that point. Looking at the data before, it only said revenue, so it's fine. We're going to say lead name. Sure. And then the last one is going to be goal. Okay. So let's save this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take sheet. We're going to do get range. I'm going to start off from the very first, so 1, 1, which stands for first row and first column. And then we're going to get the import data dot length. And this third parameter here tells you how many rows you need to go down. And then we're going to do import data position 0, which is just one of those rows within the nested array. And we're going to do dot length. And this is going to tell it how many columns it needs to account for. So here, we're going to do set values, import data. So when we run this, what we expect to happen is that we're going to take the data that we got from the API, we're going to rearrange it, we're going to go through each one, pull out the short name, description, priority, status, potential impact, funnel impact, lead name, goal, and then we're going to shove it into our spreadsheet in sheet 1, and it's going to just be within these columns. So let's go ahead and save, and then we're going to run our import Airtable data. Execution starts. We display some of the stuff. Execution completed. Didn't see any issues or errors in here. So we go back to Airtable. We can see now that we do have data being populated in here. Now that this is working, what we can do is we can continuously add in the data. And in order for you to make sure that you're not getting bad data, meaning if you don't, like, let's say for whatever reason, yesterday you had 15 rows, today you had 10 rows. If you were to do it like how we're doing it right now, you would only ever replace the first 10 rows, and then everything beyond that would never get replaced. So what we want to do first is we want to clear out this data before each and every single run. So up here, what we're going to say is sheet.get data range, and then we're going to say clearContent. And so when this runs, it's going to remove everything from it, and then it'll replace it with the information. So just to show you what that means, right now the Google, the Airtable data only has 21 rows altogether, 22 if you include the header column over here. So let's take some of this and let's paste it down so that you can see when we do the clearContent, it's going to remove everything. And we already know that this doesn't actually belong here. So let's go ahead and run that and we'll see how that looks. So I'm going to run the import Airtable data, run it. When it completes, it removed everything that didn't fit what was in Airtable. So this is a perfect way for you to always keep your Google Sheet in sync with your Airtable database. So another thing real quick before we dive into Data Studio now, is up on the upper left hand, there's an option for triggers. This is really important if you want to keep your Airtable data in sync with your spreadsheet. On here, let me actually hide my image over here. You can see add trigger is an option on the bottom right over here. When you click on that, a modal is going to appear up, and within here you can access the settings for how you want to set your automation. So if we say time driven, you can do it every hour, every 2 hours. You can set this to every minute, so you can do it every 5 minutes or every 30 minutes. You can do it once a day, really up to you. But this is how you're going to make sure that your Google spreadsheet always has all the latest data from your Airtable. And that's going to be very important when you're using Data Studio to build out and showcase a report based on this data. So let's go ahead and open up Data Studio now. So it's datastudio.google.com, and then you're going to, on the upper right, click on the Create Data Source. We're going to choose Google Sheets as our option. And then you're just going to find the spreadsheet that is important to you. And then we have spreadsheet 1, sheet 1 for the worksheet. We'll connect that, and then it'll display all the fields that we already had before that we were messing with. and enter it into the data. Let's just go ahead and hit the explore button so I can show you what this data looks like. So now that we have our Explorer open with our data from Airtable based in the sheet, we can go ahead and just enter a bunch of things. We don't need a record count over here. Let's also go ahead and remove the row numbers. We don't need the row numbers, but we essentially have a table here. So we have a name. We can add in the description to that. You can put in the goal. You can also put in the lead name, whatever. All that is nice and fine. You can actually spread this out a little bit so there's a little bit more room to breathe. But you can add different charts now for it. Let's say you want to do a pie chart, and we wanted that pie chart to be based on the status. How many statuses? We have too many statuses. Let's make this back to impact. Sure, we can do that. I'm not really a big fan of pie charts, but we can do a bar graph here. You can add basically anything that you want, and this is going to be a really nice way for you to showcase how everything is going within your Airtable data, and really make pretty dashboards to represent your data. You can also add in this little bar chart here, and let's do this lead name. But essentially now, once you've completed this this setup, what you're going to be able to do now is you're going to be able to take your Airtable data and then report on it for absolutely free. You don't have to work, well, I mean, besides your time to set this up, which, let's face it, it took us less than 30 minutes to do this together. So if you don't have the budget for Airtable to display those pretty apps with the dashboards and the charts and everything, this is a great alternative. Hell, even if you don't, even if you do have the budget and you want to report on this data and you have those charts and everything, maybe that's not the best way, because maybe you're also importing your Search Console data or your Google Ads data or analytics data or whatever the case might be. Maybe you're putting that all into Data Studio already and you want to consolidate it all into one single report. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to do it by using Google Apps Scripts, hitting the Airtable API, grabbing that data, shoving it into a spreadsheet, and then using that as a data source for your Data Studio reports. And you can blend that data with everything else that you have connected to your Data Studio account. But that's basically it for this video. If you did run into any issues, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. We're always happy to help, so don't be shy. Of course, make sure to check out some of our other videos on YouTube, where we go through all different types of applications, just like the ones that you just saw today. We also have talked about Shopify, Retool, as well as many others. And if you don't see something that you're looking for, feel free to shoot an email to feedback@bootstrapping.tools. We'll be happy to take a look at that application and possibly make a video just for you. Now, if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. It is the best way to support our channel and help us continue to make more content to help you and scrappy bootstrappers just like you. Of course, we got lots of videos coming up, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to make sure you get notified of the next video and when we release that video for you. But I'm a guy called Joe. This is Bootstrapping Tools. Let's build. It's been a pleasure, and we're out.